Welcome to the Prophecy Club. We are going to be talking about when Jesus will return. That's the first question. The question people probably want to know even more than that is, when will America be attacked by the Russians? When will America fall? We'll start with the more positive of the questions. We're going to start with, when will Jesus return? First of all, June 3rd was Prophecy Club's 25th anniversary on the radio. So, happy birthday to Prophecy Club. And I thought it would be maybe a good thing to start the broadcast, since we were just having this 25th anniversary here just in the last couple of days. Thought it would be interesting to tell you how it all started. I had already met Dimitri Duduman, Ron Wyatt, Henry Gruver before this, and was already very much into Bible prophecy, teaching Bible prophecy at our church and things like that, but had no interest in going into anything ministry-wise. So one day this phone call comes in from a fellow by the name of Doc. He was heading up a local radio station. He called and he says, hey, we are starting up a new radio station in Topeka, Kansas. It's been dark for several years. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, it means it's been off the air. He said, we bought the station and we're trying to resurrect a new station, new Christian station in the area. And we're trying to get Jack L. Frost to come on. Now, this was a guy at the time taught Bible prophecy and wanted to see if you would be willing to support him. He gave us your name as one of his supporters in the area and wanted to see if you'd like to help him. And I said, well, okay, what does it cost? He said, well, we're asking him to start a 15-minute daily radio program, and it costs about $240 a month. And I said, well, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll stand for $200 a month of it. And he said, oh, great, okay, I'll call you back. So about 15 minutes later, he called me back, and he said, well, you're not going to believe this. He said he still doesn't want to come on the radio. And even though you're going to pay for $200 of the $240 worth. So what he said was I should get you to do the radio program. So how'd you like to do a 15-minute radio program on Bible prophecy? And my exact thought was, well, I don't really have anything to say, but I would certainly like to get on there and tell them about Dimitri Duduman and Ron Wyatt and Henry Gruver, and maybe some others. So I said, well, okay, let me pray about it, and I'll get back with you tomorrow. And I called him back the next day, and I said, so it would cost $240 a month to do a 15-minute radio program on Bible prophecy. He says, yeah. I said, okay, tell you what I'll do. I will say yes. So Prophecy Club started in the early part of June. Now, we call it June 3rd because we had to for some papers, but we're not exactly certain of the date. So we started doing a 15-minute radio program, and I started reading Dimitri Duduman's testimony. Then after that, Henry Gruver's testimony, and then Henry Gruver came through, and by August of that year, we were actually holding a meeting there in the Topeka area where Henry Gruver was live in the area and speaking. And I remember we had 101 people at that meeting. And we held it down in the library, and unfortunately I didn't understand, but they said we couldn't come back, we couldn't hold ministry meetings like that at the libraries. Anyway, so that's how Prophecy Club got started. We went from station to station, city to city, until finally by late 1999 we were holding meetings in 40 cities a month. We were on 80 radio stations, 25 TV stations, and depositing about $600,000 a month. Didn't know it at the time, but we were the number 2 prophecy ministry in America. And God has assured me that that is going to return, and hopefully real soon. Can't come back fast enough for me. So anyway, our first topic we're going to talk about is, when will Jesus return? So let me start with a disclaimer. I've never made a broadcast talking about these dates before because there are so many people who have missed them. It is the death of a ministry to predict a date, especially the date of when Jesus is going to return, and miss it. And so far, all have, yes. So no, I'm not going to actually predict a specific date, but I will give you a ballpark idea. Now, I'll give you a hint. It's probably not going to be too long. It's probably going to be in most of our lifetimes. So here's the disclaimer. I do not know the exact day and hour Jesus will return, nor the date God will take down America. But having been a Bible prophecy teacher for, over 40 years, probably you would like to hear my guess on the matter. You might want to hear my best understanding. So that's what I'm going to do today. So we'll start with the best news, the furthest date down the road for Jesus' return. So when did Jesus die? Well, I looked it up, and this is the way it's worded on the internet. Using these methods, most scholars assume a date of birth for Jesus between 6 and 4 BC, and that would put Jesus' preaching beginning around AD 27 to 29, which lasted anywhere from 1 to 3 years. This is what they say. They calculate the death of Jesus as having taken place between 30 and 36. Well, most of the Christians I know probably calculate the death of Jesus in the year 33 AD. However, let's take the latest date, 36 AD. Now, let's look at that in light of some scriptures. Hosea 6:1. Come, let us return to the Lord, for he hath torn, and he will heal us. He hath smitten, and he will bind us up. Here it is. After 2 days, he will revive us, and in the third day, he will raise us up, and we will live in his sight. Now, we know that this is talking about the return of Jesus because the very next verse says, and he shall come into as the latter rain and the former rain unto the earth. So it is specifically talking about the return of Jesus, and so many people were asking Dimitri, when is all this going to happen? So Dimitri finally asked the angel. The angel came that night, tapped him on the hand, woke him up, and told him to turn to those verses and said, is a day with the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. And you tell America that if they will repent and turn to Jesus, they will make it to the third day. If they do not, America as a nation will not make it to the third day. All right, so let's talk about that. Assuming Jesus died in 36 AD. So let's add 2,000 years because it says after 2 days, means after 2,000 years, he will revive the Jews, and in the third day, they will live in his sight. So 36 plus 2,000 brings us to the year 2036. Now, I didn't say Jesus is returning in 2036. Please quote me accurately. I'm only giving you a ballpark guess today. So, after 2 days, he will revive us, and the third day he will raise us up when we shall live in his sight. So, let's take 36 plus 2,000. That brings us to 2036. But then he said after, so you got to add at least another date. So, somewhere after 2037. So, that's our first date to remember. Remember 2037. Now, let's go to the next possible scenario. Matthew 26:2. says, we know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. So it says after 2 days. And I can tell you in the Bible studies, when I have run across that, I have felt the anointing, and I really am impressed that that really is talking about 2,000 years, and it really is saying that after 2,000 years is the feast of the Passover. Now, we're not talking about just any feast. We're talking about the feast of the Passover, which is related to the last 7 months, and it is related to, shortly after that, in my opinion, is going to be the marriage supper of the Lamb. Then we go to Mark 14:1. It says, after 2 days was the feast of the Passover. So here we have 2 verses that word it exactly the same way. That's no accident. After 2 days. So after 2,000 years. After the what? Well, we can only conclude that it's after either the birth of Jesus, the anointing of Jesus in the River Jordan, or his crucifixion, or his death, or his ascension. So there's nothing, it doesn't tell us specifically. So let's take the longest date. That still brings us back to 36 AD. So here's another case where it's saying 2,000 years. That puts us, that's the second thing that's pointing to 2037. Now, let me give you another one. A lot of people, a lot smarter with dates than I am, have said that in general, the timing between Adam to Moses, the timing when there was no law, is about 2,000 years. Then most people agree from Moses to Jesus was another 2,000 years of law. Then from Jesus to his return is 2,000 years of grace. And then the millennium we know is 1,000 years long, or 1,000 years rest, totaling 7,000 years. So if Jesus died in 36 AD, add 2,000, brings us 2,000, plus you got to put in the word after. So that's the third thing pointing to the ballpark of 2037. I didn't say he's returning in 37. Now, we have three big things pointing to the ballpark of 2037, but hold on. So I called Bob Wadsworth, good friend of mine, biblical astronomer, former Prophecy Club speaker, and he's called the Star Guy. He is probably the best expert on biblical astronomy as it relates to Bible prophecy I know of. Bob, tell me, do the stars portray the start of the tribulation and the return of Jesus? He said, yes, I do, but, and I said, yes, I know. You're going to say that just because the stars portray a date does not necessarily mean anything happens on that date. And he said, yes, that's correct. Now, if you understand that, I will tell you. I said, I understand that. He says, okay. He says the stars portray the tribulation starting in the year 2040 and the return of Jesus in 2047. The stars portray the tribulation starting in 2040 and the return of Jesus in 2047. Well, 2047 would qualify because that is definitely after 2 days. Now, I did not say Jesus will return in 2036, 2037, or 2047 here. We're only estimating, but we now have 2 dates, 2037 and 2047. Now let's look at another possibility. Genesis 6:3 says, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. Yet his days shall be 120 years. Now, you look that up, and it certainly is not 120 years because mankind has lived a lot longer than 120 years. We'll be right back after this message. The recordings discussed on the Prophecy Club are typically offered for a gift of $30 per disc or title, a double disc for $45 or a triple disc for $65. If there a way that you could watch any one of our DVDs for 50 cents to $1, you probably want to know about it, right? Well, go visit watchprophecyclub.com, where you can watch over 160 Prophecy Club titles for an introductory monthly recurring subscription of just $20 a month, or a yearly subscription for $200. The early $200 subscription is the best deal because it locks in your rate against increases in monthly subscriptions. That's watchprophecyclub.com. You'll love the format. It's easy to watch, and the quality is great. WatchProphecyClub.com. WatchProphecyClub.com. Go check it out today. And now, back to the program. Mankind has lived a lot longer than 120 years. It's not saying that mankind, as in our lifespan, is going to be 120 years, because even though we are probably living longer today than we have lived in centuries on the earth, our lifespan today is still only a little over 70 years, 80 if you're lucky. But if you go back in history, most people's lifespan was down in the 40s, the 50s. I mean, they didn't live very long. So it's not 120 years. There are very few people that live 120 years old. So he's not talking about that's how long mankind lives. The experts believe that he was referring to that the days of man shall be 120 jubilees. Okay, well, what's a jubilee? A jubilee is 50 years. So if it's saying that mankind's time in sin will be 120 jubilees, jubilees are 50 years, so you take 120 times 50, and that comes up to exactly 6,000. Well, why is that interesting? Because God made the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and he rested on the seventh day. So everything is kind of lining up. Now, let me throw another wrench in the works here. You remember that 2 cows were born on the same day, not an accident. Not only were they born on the same day, September 25th of 2014, that just happens to be the 49th Shemitah. Now, let me qualify that. When I say they're born on September 25th, one was actually physically born on the 25th. One was born the day before, but it was not released to the public until the following day. So the public heard of these 2 cows basically on the same day, September 25th, 2014. So the information was released to the public on the same day. Now, what's so special about these 2 cows? Well, one was a black and white cow, pristine, well-designed 7 written right between its eyes. And I mean, it looks like a typewriter 7. It looks like a perfect 7. There's not a white hair in the black area. There's not a black hair in the white area. It is like God reached down with his typewriter and put a 7 right between the eyes of this cow. That's the black cow. But the other cow was a red cow. Now, this red cow was solid red. I mean, solid red. But it had a sloppy 7. In other words, kind of like a scribbled 7. And it was also written right between its eyes. Now, is God saying something? How do you get 2 of those cows to have to be released to the public on the same day, and that just happens to be the 49th Shemitah? They both have a 7. It's both right between their eyes. One's black and white. One's red. If the sloppy 7 represents 7 years of tribulation, then can we also conclude that the black cow with a pristine 7 represents 7 good years, in that they were both born or released to the public on the same day? That may be signaling the start of 7 years of plenty, which will be followed by 7 years of tribulation. What you talking about, Stan? Go to Genesis 41:17. Now I'm going to summarize this. Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream, there came up out of the river 7 cattle, fat-fleshed, well-favored. 7 other cattle came up after them that were ill-favored, lean flesh, like I never saw in all of the land of Egypt, for badness. So then he went back to sleep. He woke up. The Pharaoh had a second dream of 7 ears came up in one stalk, full and good. Then 7 ears withered, thin, and blasted with east wind, sprung up after them. Joseph, interpreting the dream, said, the dream is one. God hath showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. There's about to be 7 good years, followed by 7 years of famine. Are the 2 cows born or released to the public on September 25th of 2014, the day of the 49th Shemitah, if they're saying that the world has been given 7 last years of plenty, that would mean that they would conclude in the year 2021. Remember that date, 2021. If the tribulation starts in 2021, the 7 years of famine, that would make it conclude in 2028. Well, if Jesus was crucified in 28 AD, then that still sort of qualifies. So we're still sort of in the ballpark there. If Jesus died in 28 AD, then you add 2,000, that brings to 2028, so we're still in the ballpark. So our unofficial guessing at this point puts the return of Jesus somewhere between 2028 and 2029. 2047. Hang on, there's more. Now let's move to the second question. When will America be attacked by the Russians? November the 11th of 1620 is the Mayflower Compact. Add 400 years, it comes up to 2020. 1980 was the year Dmitri was given the warning that America is going to fall. Add 40 years, it comes up to 2020. I'm not saying America falls in 2020, but what if? I'm saying that sometime in the 2020 ballpark, we're going to reach 400 years since the Mayflower Compact and 40 years since judgment was spoken over America. So what if God made a covenant with America for 400 years? And what if sometime in 2020, God's covenant ends? Then America will be on its own. Then the only thing keeping our ship afloat is ourselves, our prayers, and our ability to keep plugging holes and bailing water. And it could be that as long as our prayers can keep Donald Trump in office, we may have a chance. But what happens when he leaves? All right, now let's talk about the good side, the bad side of that. First of all, the bad side. So if Jesus returns in 2047, that's the longest estimate. And if America falls in 2020, that's the soonest estimate. That's the worst case scenario. That would make us have to live 27 years in hell before Jesus returns. That's pretty scary. Now, the good side. If Jesus returns in 2037, that's the earliest estimate from one person, or another way of looking at it is 2028. And then if Trump can continue draining the swamp and keep us floating, and if Trump can carry us 8 years into 2025, and our fall doesn't take place until, say, 3 years after his leaving office, if America falls at the latest estimate, that would be 2028. Again, I'm not saying we're going to fall by 2028. Don't put words in my mouth here. We're only talking. We're only discussing. Just a ballpark, okay? That would make us living in a world of hell for only a few years before Jesus returns. That's the best scenario. Ballpark is, and the point is, brothers and sisters, it's up to us. Our prayers and getting our brothers and sisters across the nation to reduce their sin is about the only guarantee we really have before Jesus returns. Now, a lot of people want to say, oh, Jesus can return any day now. No, he can't. I'm going to give you a few verses here that absolutely positively prove what I'm going to say. I can guarantee Jesus cannot return today, this year. I'm even going to say he cannot return within the next 7 years. And I'm even going to say it's probably a little difficult for him to even return in under 10 years. But that's a guess. But the 7 years is guaranteed. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Daniel 2:31. Now, let me read these, 4 verses. Let me go through it, listen carefully, then let me explain to you what these verses are saying, and then you'll say, you're right. Jesus cannot return right now. Now, what I'm about to read for you is the dream that Daniel was given that says that in the days of these kings, in other words, in the days of a world government, the final world government is when God of heaven is going to set up a kingdom. Meaning, until there is a world government, Jesus cannot return. That's what it's saying. But you need to listen to the verses. Probably ought to have Bible in hand so that when your friends say, oh, Jesus can return any day, no, you can say, it's impossible. It's impossible. Jesus cannot return today. Not until there's a world government. So here's your proof. Daniel 2:31. O thou, O king, sawest, and behold a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, that's Nebuchadnezzar's day. His breast and arms of silver, and that's the Medes and the Persians. His belly and thighs of brass, that's the Grecian Empire. His legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. The legs of iron is the European or the Roman Empire of long ago. But you notice it's the same people, and that's the reason his feet, part of iron, part of clay. The iron represents what's left of the European Union that all forms of world government, and the part of clay, in my opinion, is the Arabs coming in. Of course, we've seen a lot of immigrant Arabs come into all of the European Union. 34. Thou sawest till a stone, the stone is Jesus, was cut out without hands, which smote the image on his feet. In other words, in the days of the final and fourth world government, that's when Jesus returns. Let me read that again. That's what it's saying. Thou sawest till a stone, that's Jesus, was cut out without hands, which smote the image on his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Now, in that it has 10 toes, that's telling you, that's confirming what Revelation 13 says, and also Daniel chapter 7, that there's going to be 10 horns. In other words, they take the 7 continents, and they divide them into 10 global regions. Each global region has a ruler. That ruler blasphemes God, and he's given a crown. And one of those regional rulers is wounded in the head until death, but he doesn't die. And he rises up to be the little horn. He rises up to be the beast, or what we call the Antichrist. Now, let's go back to Daniel here. Thou sawest till the stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image on its feet, that's the fourth and final world government, which were iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold, all broken to pieces, here it is, important, together. Meaning, when Jesus returns, he destroys that whole statue, all of it, all of the world governments, everybody, except there's a little corner, the remnant. The nations are allowed to go into the millennium for 1,000 years. We'll get off topic if I explain that. And became as the chaff of the summer threshing floors. Now that one says, became as the chaff of the summer threshing floors, that is when Jesus returns with the sword of his mouth, called the morning star, and hits them, that destroys both soul and body, and turns them to ashes. Malachi 4:3 says there'll be ashes under the soles of our feet. Obadiah 1:9 says they will be as though they had not been. The summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away. In other words, dust or ashes just blows away. That no place was found for them. There is no other people left after Jesus burns the tares, except those people whose names are written in the book of life, the wheat, and the nations, which he grandfathers in, allows to live for 1,000 years. Then the stone that smote the image, that's Jesus, became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Because when Jesus rises to shake the earth terribly, everything is destroyed and leveled out except for one mountain, and on top of that mountain is the New Jerusalem. And then verse 44 says, in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom. So in summary, I don't think we have too long, brothers and sisters. So now's the time. If you haven't accepted Jesus, now's the time to do it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your prayers, and thank you for your gifts of support. God bless. Now from the Prophecy Club, some exciting opportunities for you. The Extreme Summer Blowout is now in effect. You can get 50 DVDs for $250, that's $5 each. 25 for $160, that's $6.40 each. 15 for $120, that's $8 each. 10 for $100, obviously $10 each. 6 for $70. 4 for $50, and 2 for $30. You can go to prophecyclub.com. There's a list of all the DVDs there, or you can call us and ask for the summer catalog, or download the catalog at prophecyclub.com. Flip through it, then decide which DVDs you want. That's 785-266-1112, and it expires soon. Call 785-266-1112 today. Some restrictions apply. Dr. Bree Keaton just made a brand new DVD. It's called Is Trump or Patrick Henry? Now, it's not a political talk. Bree's mother was a descendant of the patriot Patrick Henry. She reveals shocking, never released private family records, bloodlines, and gives you the true story of how God used Patrick Henry to save America. She helped me to see more clearly where we are and where we're going, because most of history has already repeated itself. I promise you will like this DVD. Is Trump our Patrick Henry? prophecyclub.com.